Something shifted. You cannot always name the moment it happened, but you know the feeling. You were somewhere simple, maybe a walk with nowhere to be, maybe a morning that had no schedule pulling at it, maybe a room with nothing competing for your attention, maybe a conversation with one person who was genuinely there, and something in you relaxed in a way it rarely does. Not the relief of finishing something difficult, not the temporary exhale of a problem solved. Something quieter and more real than either of those. The feeling of being enough, of the moment being enough, of the moment being enough, of not needing anything to be added to what was already there. You have felt this, and you have also noticed that the more your life fills up, the harder that feeling is to find. The more there is to manage, the less present you feel inside it. The more is added, the more something essential seems to get crowded out. The fuller the calendar, the emptier the days somehow feel. You are not imagining that. The research is clear, and the lived experience is clearer. Simpler lives feel happier. Not because simple means easy, not because simplicity means having less of everything, but because of something specific happening in the psychology of human experience when complexity is reduced and space is allowed. Something that most people have been unknowingly designing out of their lives. And that understanding, once it lands, changes how you build every day that follows. Here is the first thing you need to understand. The human mind was not designed for the volume of input it is currently receiving, not even close. For most of human history, the information a person processed in a lifetime was roughly equivalent to what now arrives in a week. The stimulation, the choices, the competing demands, the constant availability of more things to respond to, more content to absorb, more decisions to make, more comparisons to measure yourself against. None of this was part of the environment the brain evolved inside. The brain evolved for a world that was quieter, more local, more repetitive, where the number of decisions required in a day was manageable, and the number of relationships to maintain was finite, and the pace of information arrival was slow enough that the processing could keep up. And the brain in that world, operating within those conditions, had something it almost never has now: capacity left over, capacity for genuine rest, for the kind of thinking that happens not in response to something, but in the absence of demands, for the slow, meandering, non-directed inner life that is actually where most meaning gets made. The modern mind has almost no capacity left over. It is running at or near full all the time, receiving, responding, processing, deciding, comparing, managing, monitoring, all day, often into the night. And the mind running at full capacity all the time is a mind that cannot do the things that actually produce the experience of a life well lived. It cannot be genuinely present, cannot feel genuine satisfaction, cannot access the quiet layer where purpose and connection and real contentment live, because those things require space, and space is what complexity removes. But here is what you are missing about why the complexity keeps accumulating. It does not arrive all at once. It arrives in increments. Each addition seems reasonable. Each commitment seems manageable. Each new thing added to the life seems like it will enhance rather than crowd. The new subscription, the new obligation, the new relationship that needs tending, the new goal that needs tracking, the new platform that needs maintaining, the new standard that needs meeting. Each one, in isolation, seems like not very much. Together, they constitute a life that is running at a level that was never chosen, that was assembled piece by piece through 1,000 individually reasonable decisions that accumulated into something no single decision would have produced. And at some point you look at what has accumulated and notice something. You are busy, but you are not fulfilled. You are managing a lot, but you are not enjoying much. You have more than you did, but something that mattered has gotten harder to find. That gap between the fullness of the life and the emptiness inside it is the gap that simplicity is designed to close. Here is where it gets really specific, because simplicity is not about removing things arbitrarily. It is not about becoming a minimalist as an aesthetic or an identity. It is not about owning fewer objects or living in a smaller space or performing a version of simple that looks a certain way. It is about something more internal and more important, reducing the gap between the life you are managing and the life you are actually living. Here is what that gap looks like in practice. You are in a conversation, but part of your mind is somewhere else, in the thing that needs doing later, in the problem that is not resolved, in the message that is waiting for a response, in the 10 other things that have a claim on your attention right now. So the person you are with gets a fraction of you, and the conversation gets a fraction of what it could be. And the moment, which is the only moment that is actually happening, is inhabited by only part of you. That is the gap between the experience being available and the experience being fully received. Simplicity closes the gap, not by removing all complexity from the external world, by reducing the internal load enough that genuine presence becomes possible. And genuine presence is the mechanism through which happiness actually arrives, not through more things, through fuller contact with fewer things. Now here is something about happiness that most people fundamentally misunderstand, and this misunderstanding is the reason most people keep adding to their lives in search of happiness and keep finding that the addition did not produce what was expected. Happiness is not a result of having more. It is a quality of attention. Here is what this means. The same meal eaten with genuine attention produces more pleasure than the same meal eaten while looking at a screen. The same conversation engaged with fully produces more connection than the same conversation managed from a distracted state. The same walk taken without headphones produces more restoration than the same walk filled with content. The experience is the same. The attention is different, and the quality of the attention is what determines the quality of the experience. This is not a philosophical claim. It is one of the most consistent findings in the psychology of human happiness. The subjective experience of well-being is more closely correlated with the quality of attention brought to experiences than with the content of the experiences themselves. What you pay attention to and how fully you pay attention to it is a better predictor of your happiness than what you have or what you do, which means the question is not how do I get more things that make me happy. The question is how do I develop the capacity to be fully present with what is already here, and that capacity is the thing that complexity systematically erodes. Here is the midpoint truth. The simpler life feels happier, not because it has more of the right things, because it has less of the things that prevent you from experiencing what is already there. This is the distinction that changes everything. Most people approach the search for a better life by adding experiences, adding achievements, adding relationships, adding goals, adding metrics to track whether the life is improving. The simplicity framework inverts this. It asks, what could be removed that would allow what is already here to be more fully experienced? Not what can I add to feel more alive? What can I remove that is preventing me from feeling the aliveness that is already available? That inversion is counterintuitive in a culture built entirely around the logic of more, but it is more consistent with how happiness actually works. The person who is fully present in an ordinary moment is happier than the person who is half present in an extraordinary one. The life with one deeply nourishing relationship is more satisfying than the life with 10 surface-level ones. The work that is meaningful and engaged with fully is more fulfilling than the work that pays more, but fractures the attention into 100 competing directions. Depth over breadth, presence over volume. Fewer things experienced fully, rather than many things experienced partially. That is the psychology of the simpler life. Let us talk about decision fatigue, because this is one of the least discussed and most significant ways that complexity drains the quality of daily life. Every decision you make costs something, not a large cost, not always a conscious cost, but a real one. The cognitive resource required to evaluate options, weigh trade-offs, consider consequences, and arrive at a choice is finite. It depletes across the day, and as it depletes, the quality of subsequent decisions decreases, not because you become less intelligent, because the resource that good decisions draw from is running lower. This is documented, consistent, and almost universally ignored, because most people experience the depletion as tiredness, as vague fatigue, as the foggy state of the evening where nothing quite works properly. They attribute it to the day being long or the work being hard, but a significant portion portion of what they are experiencing is the cumulative cost of hundreds of small decisions that did not need to be made. What to eat for breakfast when a simpler routine would have decided this already? Which of 20 options to choose when fewer options would have made the choice easier and produced the same quality of outcome? What to respond to first when a clearer priority system would have answered this without deliberation? Whether to attend this obligation or that one, when an honest assessment of what matters would have made the choice obvious. Every unnecessary decision is a tax, and the simpler life reduces the tax, not by making fewer choices matter, by building systems, routines, and clarity of values that make many choices automatic, removing the deliberation from the things that do not deserve deliberation, preserving the cognitive resource for the things that do, and arriving at the end of the day with more left, more presence, more capacity for genuine connection, more access to the quiet enjoyment of what is actually here. Here is something about relationships and simplicity, because the quality of your relationships is one of the strongest predictors of life satisfaction available. Not the quantity, the quality. And the quality of relationships is almost entirely determined by the quality of presence each person brings to them. Presence that is fractured by too many competing demands cannot produce depth. The relationship that gets the distracted, half-present, managing something else version of you is not experiencing the version of you that produces genuine connection. It is experiencing the remainder of you after everything else has taken what it needed, and the remainder, however warm, however well-intentioned, is not the same as the full. The simple life protects the quality of the most important relationships by giving them access to more of you, not more time necessarily, more presence within the time. The dinner that is fully attended to, the conversation that does not compete with the phone, the evening that has not been pre-depleted by a day of unnecessary complexity, the version of you that shows up to the people who matter when something has been protected, when the life is simple enough that the people who matter get the real you, not the managed, depleted, half-present version, the actual you. That is one of the most concrete things simplicity produces, and it is one of the most valuable. Let us talk about comparison, because this is one of the primary engines of unnecessary complexity in modern life, and it is largely invisible because it runs so automatically. The awareness of what other people have, what they are doing, where they are going, what their lives look like. This awareness, for most of human history, was limited to the people in physical proximity, the neighbors, the community, the people you could actually see. Now it is unlimited. You can compare yourself at any moment to the curated highlights of millions of people, and the comparison almost always produces the same feeling, the feeling that what you have is not quite enough, that where you are is not quite where you should be, that the version of your life visible to you is somehow less than the versions visible elsewhere. This feeling is not an accurate reading of reality. It is the predictable output of comparing your ordinary moments to other people's highlight reels, but the brain does not automatically correct for that difference. It receives the comparison and generates the conclusion: you are behind. You do not have enough. More is needed before the life is what it should be, and the response to that conclusion is to add, to pursue the things that the comparison suggested were missing, to close the gap that the comparison said existed, but the gap is not real, and the adding does not close it, because the comparison recalibrates the moment the addition is made. There is always more visible, always someone with something you do not have yet, always a version of life that exceeds the version you just upgraded to. The comparison is a moving target, and chasing a moving target produces exactly the kind of complexity that prevents the experience of enough. The simpler life reduces the comparison, not by becoming uninformed about the world, by becoming deliberate about the inputs that shape the internal sense of what is sufficient, by choosing consciously to measure the life against your own values rather than against the curated highlights of everyone else, and finding in that measurement something that has always been there, that enough is closer than the comparison was making it appear. Here is something about time that the simpler life reveals. Most people do not feel like they have enough of it, but the shortage of time is almost never the actual problem. The actual problem is the ratio of time to attention. When attention is scattered across too many things, time feels short, because each minute is doing the work of several minutes, carrying several competing demands, being pulled in several directions at once. When attention is gathered, time expands, not literally, in the felt sense. The hour spent fully present in one thing feels longer and more nourishing than the hour spent partially present in several things. The morning with one clear intention feels more spacious than the morning with 10. The relationship with one person who is genuinely there feels richer than 3 relationships that are always slightly elsewhere. This is one of the most consistent and least discussed benefits of the simpler life. Time does not change. The relationship to time does, and the relationship to time changes when the attention is no longer fractured, when there is less competing for it, less pulling at it, less demanding to be managed in the same moment that something real is happening. And in the moments when the attention is truly gathered, something becomes available that is almost impossible to find inside complexity. The sense that the moment is actually happening, not rushing past, not being managed from a distance, actually here, actually real, actually enough. Here is something about routine and its relationship to freedom, because this is one of the most misunderstood aspects of the simpler life. Most people associate routine with limitation, with the same thing every day, with the absence of spontaneity, with a life that has traded aliveness for predictability. The simpler life is not that. The routine in a simpler life is not a cage. It is the structure that makes freedom possible. Here is why. Every decision you automate through routine is a decision you do not have to make, and every decision you do not have to make is cognitive resource returned to you, resource that can go toward genuine presence, toward creative thinking, toward the things that actually benefit from deliberation, toward the spontaneous moments that the routine creates space for. The person with a clear morning routine does not need to decide what to do in the morning. The decisions were made in advance. The routine executes, and the morning, rather than being consumed by low-level decision-making, is available for presence, for thought, for the kind of slow, unstructured engagement with the beginning of the day that the absence of routine prevents. The routine frees the mind, not from engagement with life, from the low-level maintenance tasks that would otherwise fill the space where genuine engagement belongs. The simpler life uses routine not to reduce aliveness, but to protect it, by ensuring that the cognitive resource is not spent on the things that do not deserve it, so that it is available for the things that do. Let us talk about possessions, because the physical environment is part of the internal experience. Not all of it, not even most of it, but part. The research on clutter and cognitive load is consistent. Physical disorder in the environment creates low-level cognitive demand, not dramatic demand, not the kind that rises to conscious attention, the kind that runs below awareness. The visual system registers the disorder. The brain allocates a small amount of processing to it, to the unfinished quality of it, to the things that need to be done that the disorder represents. Each individual instance is trivial. The cumulative effect is not. The person who lives in a persistently cluttered environment is experiencing a persistent low-level cognitive drain that they may not consciously attribute to the clutter. They feel more tired, more scattered, less able to think clearly, less able to fully relax, not because of a single source of stress, because of hundreds of tiny ones, each one negligible, together meaningful. The simpler physical environment is not about aesthetics. It is about cognitive hygiene, reducing the number of things that make a claim on the mind, creating spaces where the mind, encountering nothing that demands its attention, can actually rest, can wander, can arrive at the thoughts that require silence and space to surface. And the thoughts that require silence and space to surface are almost always the ones that matter most. Here is something about the relationship between simplicity and meaning, because the simpler life is sometimes accused of being a small life, of trading ambition for ease, of choosing comfort over the things that actually matter. This accusation misunderstands what simplicity actually is. The simpler life is not a life with fewer things that matter. It is a life with fewer things that do not. The clarity that comes from simplification is not the clarity of reduced ambition. It is the clarity of knowing what actually matters, which is something that complexity obscures. When the life is full of things, all roughly equally demanding, the things that genuinely matter compete on equal terms with the things that merely accumulated. The urgent and the important get the same time. The meaningful and the merely present receive the same attention. The life that was supposed to be about something specific gets lived at the same level of engagement as the life of pure reaction. Simplification is the process of sorting, of deciding deliberately rather than by default which things actually deserve the finite time and energy available, and making that decision consciously and honestly almost always produces the same result. The things that genuinely matter are fewer than the things currently receiving attention, and the things that do not genuinely matter have been taking a share of the resource that the things that matter need. Simplification returns that share, not to doing less, to doing the fewer things that matter with more of everything, more presence, more energy, more genuine engagement, more actual investment in the things that were supposed to matter all along. That is not a small life. That is a more fully lived one. Here is something about the specific experience of enough, because this is the thing simplicity produces that nothing else quite does. The experience of enough is not the same as the experience of abundance. Abundance is having more than you need. It produces a temporary satisfaction that fades as the more becomes the new baseline. Enough is something different. Enough is the specific, quiet, grounded feeling that what is here is sufficient, that this moment does not require supplementing, that the life being lived right now contains what is needed to feel genuinely okay, not thrilled, not peak experience, okay in the deep sense, the sense of being where you are supposed to be, doing what is worth doing, with the people who matter, in a life that is genuinely yours. That experience is not produced by accumulation. It is produced by the presence that allows what is already here to actually land. And presence is produced by simplicity, by having enough space in the life that the experience of the life can actually be received, by having enough quiet that the things already here can be heard, by having enough stillness that the moment does not rush past before it can be felt. Enough is always available, but it requires the conditions under which it can be experienced, and those conditions are what the simpler life is built around. Let us talk about what simplifying actually looks like, not as a dramatic overhaul, not as a single decision to live differently, as a series of honest questions asked about what is currently in the life. The first question is, does this add to what matters, or does it merely occupy space? Not whether it is good in the abstract, whether it is contributing to the specific things you have decided actually matter, the relationship that energizes or the one that drains, the commitment that aligns with your values or the one that was inherited by default, the habit that serves the life you are trying to build or the one that is simply habitual. Honest answers to that question produce a different view of the life, not a judgment of what should be eliminated, a clearer picture of what is actually serving the life and what is merely occupying it. The second question is, what would I protect if I had less time? Not what is on the calendar. What would survive an honest accounting of what actually matters? The answer to this question almost always reveals something. The list of what would survive is shorter than the list of what is currently being maintained, and everything that would not survive the honest accounting is contributing to the complexity without contributing to the life. The third question is, what does this cost beyond the time? Not just the hours, the attention, the energy, the cognitive space, the presence that the thing requires, and whether the thing is worth what it is requiring. These questions do not produce a manifesto. They produce clarity, and clarity, applied honestly, produces the decisions that move the life in the direction of simpler, not all at once, one decision at a time, in the direction of the life that has more space in it, more presence in it, more of the specific feeling you have already had. That feeling in the simple moment, in the walk with nowhere to be, in the morning with nothing pulling at it, in the conversation with one person who is genuinely there. That feeling is what the simpler life is built to make available, not as a special moment, as the ordinary texture of the days. Here is where we leave this, not with a prescription for what the simpler life should look like, with the truth that makes simplifying worth doing. The life you are looking for is not on the other side of more. It is inside what is already here, waiting for the space and the presence and the quiet that would allow you to actually experience it. The moment you are in right now, stripped of the noise and the competition and the comparison and the constant arrival of more things demanding attention, is already enough. Not perfect, not everything you have ever wanted, not the resolved, complete, finished version that the addition of the right things would supposedly produce, but enough to feel genuinely alive in, to be genuinely present in, to receive what is actually here rather than rushing toward what might be there. The simpler life is not a smaller life. It is a life that has been made spacious enough to actually be lived, where the moments are received rather than managed, where the relationships are inhabited rather than maintained, where the work is engaged with rather than performed, where the day ends and something was actually there in it, not because more happened, because more of you was present for what happened. That is what simpler lives feel like, and that feeling is available to you, not someday, not after the right amount has been removed. In the next moment, you allow to be genuinely quiet. In the next conversation, you give your actual attention. In the next hour, you let be exactly what it is without adding to it. Right there, in the space you create, is the life that was always here, waiting for you to stop filling it long enough to feel it.